Hi, my name's Kira, and this is a story of how my newborn almost got killed by my boss. You might think I'm exaggerating. I wish I was. But if you knew Teresa, you'd understand why I'm not. I've worked for her for 10 years. 10 long, grueling years filled with stress, humiliation, and the constant fear of losing my job. She's the kind of woman who thrives on power, who feeds off the misery of others. She doesn't just manage people, she owns them. At least that's what she thinks. She doesn't talk to people, she yells at them, she barks orders and you obey, because if you don't, there will be consequences. Mistakes aren't tolerated, not at all. There was always punishment. Salaries get slashed over the smallest infractions. A typo in an email? Deducted. Late by a minute? Deducted. One time, a worker named Angela sneezed too loudly in a meeting, and Teresa acted like she had committed a federal crime. Humiliation was her sport, and she played it well. Anyway, I had known from the moment I announced my pregnancy that it would be a problem. Teresa doesn't like weakness, and in her eyes, pregnancy is just that. To her, it's an inconvenience, a distraction from productivity. When I requested maternity leave, she didn't even let me finish my sentence before shutting me down.
You will only be granted 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
You heard me. That's more than enough time to recover and get back to work.
I stared at her, waiting for some sign that she was joking, some hint of humanity. There was none. I should have known better than to argue, but I had to try. Teresa, please. I need at least 2 months. That's standard in most workplaces.
Then go work somewhere else. Otherwise, it's 2 weeks or you don't have a job to come back to.
I should have walked away right then. I should have told her to shove her job where the sun doesn't shine. But I couldn't. I needed this job. I had bills to pay, a baby to prepare for. So, I agreed to the 2 weeks. But life had other plans. My labor was brutal. I don't even remember most of it. Just flashes of pain, voices shouting, the sterile white ceiling of the hospital spinning above me. At some point, everything went black. When I woke up, I was told there were complications. I had lost a lot of blood. My body was weak. Moving was agony. I spent the first week in the ICU, the second in a regular hospital bed, too fragile to stand. My baby, small and delicate, lay beside me in a bassinet. I could barely hold her without my body screaming in pain. 2 weeks passed, and I wasn't anywhere near ready to go back to work. I knew Teresa wouldn't like it, but I didn't have a choice. My body had barely begun to heal, and my baby needed me. I sent a message to HR, explaining the situation. I got no reply. And then, in the 3rd week, she came. It was late morning. The hospital room wasn't even bright yet. The blinds were drawn to keep out the harsh morning sunlight. My baby was sleeping. I was exhausted, barely functioning, my body still aching from the trauma of childbirth. And then the door flew open.
Kira.
She didn't knock, didn't hesitate, just stormed in like she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the floor, sharp and unforgiving. She wasn't dressed like someone visiting a hospital. She looked like she was on her way to a board meeting. Pressed suit, perfect hair, not a wrinkle in sight. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe the exhaustion had finally pushed me over the edge. But no, she was real, and she was furious.
Do you have any idea what you've done? Because of you, we lost the Morano deal. Do you understand how much that deal was worth? Millions, Kira, millions! And you were too busy lying in bed to do your damn job.
Teresa, please, I haven't healed yet. I can't even stand without help. I could barely get the words out. My throat was dry, my body aching in places I didn't even know could hurt. I wasn't trying to make excuses, I was simply telling the truth. But truth meant nothing to Teresa.
I don't want to hear your whining. You had 2 weeks. 2! And yet here you are, still wasting time. I need you back in the office. Today.
There's no way on earth I can go with you. She narrowed her eyes, her perfectly lined lips twisting in disgust. I was obviously not even human to her. I was an asset, a tool she could use and discard whenever she pleased. Then, she scoffed, shaking her head in mock disbelief.
Your idiot husband really ruined you, didn't he? He knocked you up, left you weak, and now you're nothing but a burden. You had potential, Kira, but no, you just had to throw it all away for a useless brat.
Something inside me snapped. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that my husband was a better human being than she could ever dream of being. That my baby, my precious little girl, was worth more than every deal, every company, every cent she could ever make. But I was too weak. And then, before I could react, she lunged forward and grabbed my arm. Pain shot through my entire body. I screamed, instinctively clutching my stomach as a sharp, tearing sensation spread through me. I could feel something wet between my legs, and when I checked, it was blood. Teresa didn't care. She pulled harder.
Get up, now.
Tears burned in my eyes. My body wasn't ready for this. My stitches hurt. Something was wrong. I gripped the bed, trying to keep myself from collapsing as my vision blurred. And then, suddenly, the door burst open again. 2 nurses rushed in, their faces shifting from confusion to horror the second they saw what was happening.
Ma'am, let go of her!
She's bleeding! You're hurting her!
But Teresa didn't let go. If anything, she tightened her grip, her nails digging into my skin. The nurses tried to pull her away, but she was shockingly strong. I could hear them calling for more help, but my mind was spinning too fast, my body trembling from the pain and the blood loss. And then, she did something I never could have imagined. She let go of me. For a second, I thought she had finally come to her senses. But no, it was worse. So much worse. She turned to my baby. My heart stopped. No, please. Please don't. But Teresa wasn't listening. She reached into the bassinet and picked up my baby.
This baby is the reason you're still here, the reason you let my company fall apart. If it weren't for her, you would have been back at work weeks ago. If she's gone, you'll have no excuse.
She turned to the window. My blood ran cold. I screamed so loudly. I wanted to move and take my child from her, but I was too weak. My body refused to cooperate, and all I could do was watch as she rushed toward the glass, my baby in her arms. The nurses panicked. One of them lunged at Teresa, but she swerved, nearly reaching the window. Another nurse kicked Teresa's stomach with all her strength. She gasped, stumbling backward, the air knocked out of her. Another nurse seized the opportunity and yanked my baby from her grasp, clutching her tightly against her chest. Teresa roared in frustration. She lunged again, trying to reclaim the baby, but the nurses formed a shield, pushing her back. More people were coming now. More nurses, doctors, even patients poking their heads out into the hallway, drawn by the commotion.
Security is on their way.
Once Teresa heard that, she froze. For a moment, she looked around, calculating, assessing, and then, just as the sound of rushing footsteps echoed down the corridor, she spun on her heel and bolted out of the room. Everything after Teresa ran out of the hospital room was a blur. My body was too weak, my vision too hazy from blood loss, but I remember hearing the frantic voices of the nurses, the cries of my baby, and the pounding of footsteps as security chased after her. I barely had the strength to turn my head, but I forced myself to look toward the open doorway. A nurse was still holding my baby tightly. Another one was at my side, pressing gauze against my wound and speaking urgently to someone who I could only assume was a doctor. I wanted to ask if they had caught Teresa, but my lips wouldn't move. I fainted. When I woke up, the hospital room was quiet. Too quiet. A nurse noticed I was awake and immediately came to my side.
You're okay, Mrs. Kira. You lost a lot of blood, but we managed to stabilize you.
What about my boss? Teresa? Did she escape?
She got away. Security chased her through the hospital, but she managed to escape into the parking lot. She stole a car and drove off before anyone could stop her.
My stomach dropped. That monster was still out there, free to do whatever she wanted. The thought made me sick. But then, when I looked at the nurse, she seemed as if she was holding back more information. What else? Don't hide anything from me.
The police were already on high alert after we called them about her attack. They found her not long after she fled. But she didn't stop for them. She tried to escape. You know, speeding through the streets like a maniac. She ended up ramming straight into a police vehicle before crashing into a concrete wall.
I didn't know whether to feel sad, relieved, or angry. After what she did to me, I couldn't pity her. The nurse continued.
She survived, but she was badly injured. They took her to the hospital under police custody. And, well, let's just say she's finally getting what she deserves.
After hearing that she got arrested, I was so relieved that finally, everything was over. But it wasn't because Teresa managed to escape police custody on the same day the internet got to know about what happened. Apparently, a nurse had recorded and posted everything. From the moment Teresa tried to drag me out of bed, the moment she tried to kill my baby. The video went viral within hours, sparking outrage across social media. People were disgusted by her actions, calling her a monster, a disgrace, a danger to society. And then, things got worse for her. The police were actively searching for her, as well as everyone who knew about the case, especially my colleagues. Angry mobs gathered outside her house, demanding justice. By nightfall, things escalated. Someone set fire to her house, burning it to the ground. Her family publicly disowned her, refusing to take responsibility for her actions. She had no one left. Eventually, the police managed to catch and arrest her again. When the case got to the court, she was charged with multiple crimes: escaping custody, endangering a baby and mother, and assaulting hospital staff. Some of my colleagues also filed cases of abuse against her with evidence. The court sentenced her to 18 years in prison and ordered her to pay me a massive sum in damages, but I doubted she had anything left to give. I heard she broke down in court when they announced the ruling, screaming and sobbing, but no one had sympathy for her. I didn't know Teresa had a child, but she did, and the court put the child in the care of the government. I also requested that the money I was supposed to receive from Teresa be given to her child, and everyone praised me. The company compensated my colleagues who came out to show that they were abused. Teresa ended up in prison, completely alone. Her child never visited her and cut her off entirely. When asked why, the child simply replied, "She always cared more about her company than her family. Now she has neither. Serves her right." We later heard that Teresa was assigned a prison job, cleaning floors, washing dishes, and doing laundry. With her broken hand never fully healed, every task was pure agony. To make things worse, her prison supervisor was a former employee she had fired years ago. One day, after disrespecting a guard, she was dragged into the open yard. The warden ordered an example to be made of her. In front of hundreds of prisoners, she was struck with a baton, forced to kneel, and made to apologize for her arrogance. After that, she became a changed person. Thanks for watching. The way he had gone out of his way to make my life a living hell. Maybe it was the sheer cruelty of this moment, the fact that he wasn't even pretending to care about a pregnant woman. I had done everything right. I had worked hard, endured his nonsense, stayed late, met every deadline, swallowed every insult. And now, when I needed something I had every legal right to, he wasn't just saying no. He was daring me to quit. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, Daniel.
What did you just say?
I said you're pathetic. You don't belong in this office, and you know it. That's why you try so hard to tear others down. That's why you hate me. Because no matter what you do, I'll always be better than you. I hate you so much, and I'm going to report this to Mr. Lancaster. The office had changed ever since Daniel Weston walked in. Before him, work was tough, but fair. There were expectations, but also appreciation. We were a team. We had each other's backs. The CEO, Mr. Lancaster, made sure we knew our worth. Then Daniel arrived. He came in like a storm, tearing through everything good about this place. He wasn't just strict. He was cruel. He pushed people until they cracked, then mocked them for not keeping up. Deadlines became impossible. Lunch breaks turned into a privilege, not a right. He cut overtime pay, increased work hours, and made sure we knew he could replace us at any moment. Daniel would ask interns to wash his car and bring him food. Sometimes when he arrived at work, he expected employees to bow and greet him. He even made them carry his suitcase to his office. And he especially hated me. Maybe it was because, despite everything, I refused to let him break me. Maybe it was because Mr. Lancaster still noticed my hard work and praised me for it. Maybe it was just because I existed. Whatever the reason, Daniel had made it his mission to make my life miserable. He would single me out in meetings, nitpicking the smallest things. He once made me redo an entire report 3 times because of a single misplaced comma. Another time, he assigned me a project 2 minutes before my shift ended and demanded it be on his desk by the next morning. I was already exhausted. But I couldn't afford to lose this job, so I pushed through. Then came the rumors. I heard whispers in the break room. People saying Daniel had been calling me Mr. Lancaster's pet behind my back, that I must have been sleeping with him to get special treatment. I wanted to scream. Special treatment? I worked harder than anyone here. I earned every bit of recognition I got. But Daniel twisted it, made it dirty, turned my success into something shameful. And people believed him. They stopped talking to me as much, stopped asking for my input, stopped trusting me. Daniel saw it, and he was happy. He continued like that until one day, everything changed. I was pregnant. When I broke the news to my husband, he was overjoyed. After a few months, it was time for me to take my maternity leave. And now, I needed something from Daniel. Something I knew he wouldn't give me without a fight. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and marched to his office. I knocked and opened the door, but I didn't walk in. Daniel had banned me from walking into his office.
What do you want? I would prefer not seeing your face today.
I came to follow up on my maternity leave request. I submitted it last week. He didn't even let me finish before he told me it was denied. I was shocked. How could he deny a worker her maternal leave? That was ridiculous. But sir, company policy states that maternity leave is every worker's right. How can you deny mine?
I don't care what company policy states, Amber. I run this office, and I say no.
I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't even going to pretend to have a reason. He was just saying no. I decided to beg him. Maybe he needed to see me drop my defense, so I did. Sir, please. I need this leave. Please. Mr. Daniel, I beg of you.
If you really need it, quit. You'll be easily replaced. By the way, I am curious if the pregnancy for your husband or Mr. Lancaster.
I couldn't believe my ears as I stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation, some kind of logic. But it never came. Daniel went back to typing on his laptop as if I wasn't standing there. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the months of abuse, the endless torment, the way he had gone out of his way to make my life a living hell. Maybe it was the sheer cruelty of this moment, the fact that he wasn't even pretending to care about a pregnant woman. I had done everything right. I had worked hard, endured his nonsense, stayed late, met every deadline, swallowed every insult. And now, when I needed something I had every legal right to, he wasn't just saying no. He was daring me to quit. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, Daniel.
What did you just say?
I said you're pathetic. You don't belong in this office, and you know it. That's why you try so hard to tear others down. That's why you hate me. Because no matter what you do, I'll always be better than you. I hate you so much, and I'm going to report this to Mr. Lancaster. The room went deathly silent. His face twisted, veins bulging at his temple. I knew I had gotten to him very badly. Before I could react, he moved. Faster than I expected, faster than I could dodge, his hand shot out and slammed into my chest, shoving me backward. I stumbled, gasping as pain shot through me, and then he hit me again. This time, it was a full-force shove. I lost my footing, and before I could catch myself, my back slammed against the edge of the desk. A sharp, searing pain tore through my stomach. I screamed, my hands instinctively clutching at my belly. I was scared. He looked so angry. I began screaming, calling for help. Luckily, one of the workers, Liam, rushed into the office and saw the situation. He yelled at Daniel to let me go.
You want to act tough? You want to get me fired, huh? I'm pathetic? You're insane for saying that. How dare you? I'm your boss, you idiot. This isn't your business.
He dragged Daniel away from me, shoving him back with enough force to send him staggering. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, clutching my stomach.
Did you just put your hands on a pregnant woman? You psycho.
Daniel straightened his suit, glaring at Liam.
This isn't your business. Go. The hell it isn't. She's hurt. You're a monster.
I screamed again as a sharp pain rippled through my abdomen. I immediately knew something was wrong. When I looked down, I saw blood. I screamed. Liam immediately turned to me and looked so scared as he saw the blood. He quickly lifted me and began screaming for someone to call the ambulance. The whole company was thrown into an uproar. I was getting weaker. Thankfully, the ambulance arrived quickly and I was taken to a nearby hospital. I woke up in a hospital room. The pain in my stomach was dull, but still there. I was trying to figure out if I could move my limbs when a doctor opened the door and walked in. She looked like she was happy to see me awake, but I could also see sadness in her eyes. I understood the reason for the sadness when I asked about my child. I had a miscarriage. According to the doctor, whatever happened to me was severe and managed to affect my pregnancy. They tried to save my child, but had to choose between my life or my child's life, and my husband chose mine. I broke down. I sent the doctor out and refused to see anyone. All I did was cry. My head ached so badly until I fainted. I couldn't forgive Daniel. He took my child from me. I wasn't just sad, I wasn't just broken, I was furious, and I was going to make Daniel pay. I spent 2 whole weeks lying in a hospital bed, my mental health messed up, my last struggling to respond to medications. And there was not a single call from my workplace, not even a text or an email. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. I had no idea what lie Daniel must have cooked again. The workers knew I'd passed out in his office, but Daniel was a certified liar. He could have said something to them that was completely against what happened. Otherwise, Mr. Lancaster would also have called. That gave me even more reasons to want to erase Daniel. I started by texting my coworkers first, the ones who knew about his wickedness. I told them if they wanted Daniel to pay for all he's done to us, they should meet me when I get out. I sent it to 5 people I trusted. And one by one, the replies came in, agreeing to it. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. My next focus was taking everything from Daniel. I met the workers at a restaurant far from the office, where no one would overhear us. Liam was there, of course he was. He was the one who pulled Daniel off me, the only one who had the guts to stand up to him in the moment. Then there was Claire, who had been with the company for years and hated what it had become under Daniel's leadership. Mark, who had been Daniel's right-hand man when Daniel had newly been assigned his role, until he realized what kind of monster he was working for. Sophie, one of the HR reps, who had tried to report Daniel's behavior, but had been issued a stern warning by Daniel himself. And Jake, one of the interns, who had seen too much and wanted revenge just as much as I did. We're going to destroy him. Does anyone have an idea of how we can go about it?
I thought you'd never ask. I do.
The plan came together faster than I expected. Daniel had enemies. He had a trail of destruction behind him. It was just a matter of exposing it. Claire had access to records, emails, reports, things that showed just how corrupt Daniel was. Sophie had access to HR complaints that had been buried. We gathered everything. Every unethical decision, every harassment report, every shady deal, and then we leaked it. A carefully crafted email was sent to the CEO, board members, and every major news outlet in the city. Within hours, whispers started. By morning, Daniel's name was everywhere. While there was being dealt with, Mark struck. Mark knew Daniel's schedule inside and out. He knew exactly when Daniel would be in an important meeting, so we planned accordingly. Jake hacked into the office projector system. Right in the middle of a presentation Daniel was having, the afternoon or the second day, the screen flickered. And then, instead of his report, a slideshow of his worst emails, his worst behavior, his insults toward employees, his outright illegal actions, and of course, the day he pushed me, a pregnant woman, flashed across the screen. Right in front of the CEO, right in front of the investors, right in front of everyone who mattered. The CEO rained insults on him.
We were trying not to believe what's circulating in the news about you. but this just proves that you're nothing but a disgusting monster. Get out of my company.
By now, Daniel was panicking. He knew his days were numbered. That's when I made my move. Once Daniel got to the company, I stormed in. I'd already spoken to Mr. Lancaster. The man had called me to apologize. According to him, Daniel had told everyone that I tried to force myself on him, so he pushed me away because he found it disgusting that a married woman would do such a thing. I walked into his office, boiling with anger. I pushed the door open and looked him dead in the eyes. "You animal! How dare you! You made me lose my child and still had the guts to lie about it when you assaulted me." The workers immediately gathered as they heard my loud voice. I told everyone what he did and dared him to deny. He couldn't. He looked at the floor in shame, unable to even say a word. "You're so pathetic, Daniel. You're sick. You're insane, and I hope you rot in jail." Before he could react, 2 police officers stepped inside. Mark had called them. One of them held up a warrant.
Mr. Daniel, you're under arrest for assault, workplace harassment, and defamation of character.
Daniel, as shameless as he was, tried to fight with the cops. But he was no match for them. He was handcuffed and dragged out of the company, with the workers watching everything unfold.
You can't do this. Don't listen to Amber, she's crazy.
I found it funny. It was quite Rich calling me crazy, when he was the one thrashing and screaming like a crazy man. Mr. Lancaster walked in just in time before everyone dispersed. He apologized to me again, publicly now. He gave me back my job and promised to make the company a healthy place again. 1 week later, Daniel was taken to the court. He had so many people testifying against him in the court, even those who were his people. The testimonies against him plus the evidence was more than enough. Daniel was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. He screamed and cried as he was being pulled away, but no one pitied him, especially not me. When people saw how cruel Daniel had been, his wife was attacked by thugs just 3 days after he was locked up. Tragically, she lost their baby. She had been pregnant. When she visited Daniel to break the news, he was devastated. Knowing he wouldn't be released for 15 years, Daniel sank into deep depression. Fearing for her life, his wife filed for divorce and sent him a letter saying she couldn't wait that long and still wanted to have a child. I knew all of this because my husband was the head warden at the prison where Daniel was locked up. He vowed to make Daniel's life miserable. One time, he set Daniel up, making it look like Daniel had snitched on another inmate. As a result, Daniel was hated and relentlessly bullied, all while my husband was the mastermind behind it all. At one point, he was set up and thrown into solitary confinement. The isolation took a toll on him until he began to lose his sanity. Thanks for watching.
Just then, Evelyn's mother charged at me and spun me around and began pushing my chair out of her house and towards the busy street. I only managed to engage the emergency brake just in time to avoid being pushed into traffic. As a result, Evelyn's mother lost her footing and slammed down hard onto the sidewalk. As she got up, she made a move to grab my chair and try to tip it, and so I slapped her as hard as I could to make her back away. Once she did, I turned the brake off and got out of there as quickly as I could. Hi there, my name is Curtis, and I have quite the story to share with you. It's quite the ride actually, and involves quite a bit of drama, although I really wish that that wasn't the case. At any rate, my story begins just after college. I had just graduated from law school and was looking to find a firm that would hire me. Thankfully, my good grades had already gotten me some attention from a few firms, and I was trying to decide which one to work for when I saw the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in a coffee shop. I knew that I had to introduce myself, and so I went over and said hi and told her my name. At first, she was a bit hesitant to speak with me, but I put the charm on, and within a few minutes, she was laughing, and we were making plans to go out on a date. She told me her name was Evelyn, and that she had just graduated from medical school, and was on the fast track to becoming a surgeon. I found this fascinating, of course, and I knew that she and I would make for a great pair. I was of course worried that she would stand me up though. After all, I can be pretty charming, but there is a major catch. You see, not everyone can get past the fact that I'm in a wheelchair. Sadly, I was born with a rare condition that made my legs useless. I still have feeling in them, but sadly, I will never be able to walk. But I have come to terms with it, and I have never let it hold me back. But it is a hard thing for most people to accept. So when Evelyn showed up, and we ended up having a lovely time, I was beyond happy. The next few months were wonderful. We went on dates and really got to know one another. I was so happy that she was incredibly intelligent and had a great sense of humor too. We were madly in love, but then it came time to introduce each other to the other's family. Mine was very welcoming and accepted Evelyn with open arms, but Evelyn's side did not go so well. Her father had left her mother and Evelyn when she was very young, and Evelyn had told me that her mother had hated men ever since, but something told me that she didn't care for me because of other reasons.
Hello, Mother. This is Curtis.
This is Curtis? Are you sure you didn't leave half of him outside?
Mother.
Oh, it's okay, Evelyn. Your mother just has a very good sense of humor. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yes, it was just a bad joke. Nice to meet you, Kurt.
I of course knew that it wasn't a joke, and that she very clearly didn't like me very much. The fact that she shortened my name from 2 syllables to 1 only reinforced the fact that she hated me. I tried not to take it personally, but I knew that it probably had something to do with my being in a wheelchair. Perhaps she hated all men, but she especially hated me. Over the next few years, Evelyn's mother would constantly ask her if she was still dating Wheels. It was a derogatory nickname that she had given me. Although she never said it to my face, she always used it over the phone when she spoke with Evelyn. As annoying as she was, I chose to ignore her. After all, I was in love with Evelyn and not her mother. So while it bothered me that she hated me so much, I knew that it didn't really matter since Evelyn and I were in love and were making plans to get married once she finished her residency. Around the same time, I was being offered a position as a junior partner in the law firm that I worked for. Things were really looking up for us. At least they were until Evelyn began working more chaotic hours at the hospital. Her shifts were longer than they used to be, and she was always tired when she was home. I felt sympathy for her because it looked as though they were working her to the bone. I was incredibly worried for her, and I wanted her to take a step back before she burned herself out, but she wouldn't listen. My love, you need to remember that you are only human, and if you keep going like this, you'll burn out.
It's okay. I can handle it.
Evelyn, you're working too hard. You need to rest more.
Work? Oh, yes. I know, but I need to put in my time until I get a full-time position. I just need you to be patient.
I can be patient, but I hate seeing you burning the candle at both ends like this. I was so worried about Evelyn, and when she started to get thinner than she already was, and began to have dark circles around her eyes all the time, I knew that something wasn't right. I tried to go to her mother to tell her that I needed her help to convince Evelyn that she needed to slow down and prioritize her health, but she was no use. Something is wrong, and she needs us to support her. Please, I need you to help convince her to slow down. She is passionate about her job, but if she keeps going like this, she will kill herself.
Hardly. All she needs to drop the dead weight. That dead weight being you. My daughter is going to really make something of herself, and she doesn't need to date someone as disgusting as you. I doubt that you could even give me a grandchild. I bet nothing below the waist works on you. Honestly, I don't know why Evelyn would ever date some cripple.
Can you be sensible for 1 minute? Your daughter needs you, and all you can think about is how much you hate me. Forget about me for a minute, and just focus on the fact that your daughter needs your help. Just then, Evelyn's mother charged at me and spun me around, and began pushing my chair out of her house and towards the busy street. I only managed to engage the emergency brake just in time to avoid being pushed into traffic. As a result, Evelyn's mother lost her footing and slammed down hard onto the sidewalk. As she got up, she made a move to grab my chair and try to tip it, and so I slapped her as hard as I could to make her back away. Once she did, I turned the brake off and got out of there as quickly as I could. The next day, I woke up to the sounds of breaking glass. I raced outside and saw Evelyn throwing rocks through the windows of my car. What are you doing?
What does it look like? I'm making you suffer for attacking my mother. How dare you try to rape her?
What are you talking about? I went to see her to get her to help you. You've been acting very chaotic lately, and I'm really worried about you. That's all.
Oh yeah? Is that why she has a black eye and fat lip and scrapes all over her body? You disgust me.
That isn't what happened. Your mother attacked me and tried to push me into traffic. I was just defending myself. Just then, Evelyn threw a rag soaked in lighter fluid that was on fire into my car. Within seconds, the whole thing was engulfed in flames.
I don't believe you, and I can't imagine why I was ever attracted to a cripple like you. My mother was right. You're barely half a man.
Yeah. She left before the fire department arrived, and even they arrived too late to save my car. It was a custom-built one too that was made specifically for me, so that I could drive. I could not believe what had happened. Evelyn had let her mom turn her against me, and over something that I didn't even do. Part of me was still in love with her, but at the same time, I wanted nothing to do with her. Instead, I reached out to her friends and begged them to get help for her, but Evelyn's mother had poisoned their opinions of me as well. More than a few told me that they were glad that Evelyn had been cheating on me now, knowing that I was a monster that would attack Evelyn's mother. They would not believe me when I tried to tell them the truth. In the end, I sued Evelyn and had her charged with the destruction of my property. The court awarded me $32,000 in damages, which helped me to replace the car she had destroyed, but the only other punishment they gave her was dozens of hours of community service. It was a slap on the wrist, really, but I didn't care. I was no longer tied down to her, and that was enough to make me feel some relief. That is, until a few years later, when a client approached me and wanted to sue Evelyn for medical malpractice. As it turned out, the man that Evelyn had cheated on me with had introduced her to drugs, and she got hooked. It was the real reason that she was always tired and looked like death warmed over. Well, her addiction affected her job, and she was making constant mistakes and nearly cost my client their life as a result. We ended up suing her for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she ended up losing her license as a result. After that, her life took a huge turn for the worse. Without a job to pay for her addiction, her and her boyfriend ended up stealing in order to get money to buy drugs. It didn't take long for them to get arrested and sent to prison. After that, she was in and out of jail for years before I finally lost track of her. As for her mother, the stress of her daughter being in and out of jail caused her to have a stroke which left her severely paralyzed. She lost all function on the left side of her body and was confined to a wheelchair. One day while out shopping, I happened to see her in the same shop. I could tell that she was hoping that I wouldn't notice her, and her eyes bulged out of their sockets when she saw that I noticed her and made my way over to her. I could see that she was terrified, and I relished that fact. All I did was lean over towards her. "Good to see you out and about." Wheels. Then I smiled and winked and left her there stunned and in shock. I was just happy to have dodged a bullet. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
They say when you marry someone, you marry their family too. If only someone had warned me just how true that was. Although I suppose I would still have married my husband. I truly loved him that much. Hi, my name is Sybil, and when I married Travis, I thought I'd found the perfect man. In many ways, I had. Travis was kind, loving, and the hardest working person I'd ever met. But his family? They were something else entirely. Travis's older brother, Kyle, had always been the golden child. Their parents doted on him, showering him with money, attention, and forgiveness for every mistake he made. Travis, on the other hand, was treated like an afterthought, a disappointment, even though he was anything but one. It was a dynamic that weighed heavily on him, though he rarely spoke about it. I think the main reason why was because it was far too painful to bring up, and he preferred to just move on and not let it ruin his current life. One evening, not long after Travis and I got married, he shared a story that broke my heart. It was a rare occasion when he felt strong enough to tell me about just how harsh his life was growing up.
When I was 12, I saved up for months to buy a guitar. I thought maybe if I got good at it, my parents might finally notice me. But Kyle saw it, said he wanted it, and my dad just handed it to him like it was nothing. He didn't even ask me if he could give it away.
That's awful, Travis. You didn't deserve that. Did he at least reimburse you for it?
Of course he didn't. My parents would get Kyle the latest video games on his birthdays and ignore me on my birthdays. Dad had also forced me to sleep in the shed because I didn't shovel the snow on time to sleep outside. But Kyle never did anything wrong in my parents' eyes, even when he didn't do his chores. My parents would always find an excuse, like saying Kyle was reading, when in reality, he had been playing video games all day. It's just how they've always been. Nothing I do is ever good enough.
They are the worst. But my love, I can assure you that you are more than good enough in my eyes. In fact, I think you're perfect. Despite his family's treatment, Travis persevered, and he never let his past define his future. It made growing up and becoming his own person difficult, but he did just that. Together, we opened our own restaurant, pouring our hearts and souls into making it a success. And it was. People loved our food, and the business thrived. But success has a way of attracting jealousy. When Kyle and Travis's parents saw what we had built, they decided to bankroll Kyle's own restaurant. They swore up and down that his place would outshine ours, that Kyle would finally prove he was the better son.
I'm done, Sybil. I've put up with their nonsense my whole life, but I'm not doing it anymore. Let's cut them out, completely.
I'm with you, Travis. We don't need them.
Thank you for your support. I know that I can never count on my family for any support or even love, but I will never forget that I can always count on you. We make such a great team.
We truly do. And so, we went no contact. We focused on our business and each other, growing our restaurant into a small chain with 2 additional locations. Meanwhile, we heard through the grapevine that Kyle's restaurant was struggling. There were all kinds of stories of him gambling away his profits, barely keeping the place afloat. Travis and I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. For once, the golden child's shine had dulled. I mean, he had always run with a bad crowd, but the older he was getting, the worse the vices that he indulged in were getting too. I was just glad that I had married someone stable, and, in my opinion, amazing. I had, though, that I had truly hit the jackpot. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. A few years later, Travis fell ill. There were days that he had no energy at all, and so we went to the doctors to get them to run a battery of tests. Sadly, the diagnosis wasn't good. He had a form of cancer that moved very swift and merciless, and within months, he was gone. I was shattered. The love of my life, my partner in everything, was gone. And as if losing him wasn't enough, his family showed up at the funeral. The second that I saw them walk in there, I knew instantly that I was in for something awful. As if the funeral for my husband wasn't already difficult enough. Now I had to put up with their nonsense too. They approached me immediately while the priest was officiating the funeral. Travis's dad said in a loud voice,
We need to talk now. It's important. Hey, sir. Please let us show respect and maintain silence during this sacred time.
Who do you think you are? Stay out of this. Why we're here is more important.
Everyone was shocked. How could Travis's parents act like this at their son's funeral? In order to avoid creating a scene, I followed them outside. Fine, okay, we're alone now. What do you want?
We're so sorry for your loss, Sybil, but we need to talk about Kyle. He's in trouble.
This is Travis's funeral. Why do we need to talk about Kyle?
We're sorry, but this is so important that it supersedes that. Travis is dead. However, Kyle is alive and needs your help. Surely you would think that Travis would want you to help out his one and only brother?
Are you serious? Fine. What kind of trouble? What does he need me to help him with?
He's in debt, deep debt. He went to some dangerous loan shark, Sybil. He's going to lose everything. We need your help, Sybil, before they hurt him, or worse.
They went on to explain that Kyle had borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars and couldn't pay it back. They wanted me to share Travis's inheritance with him, even suggesting I hand over one of our restaurants to Kyle. You have some nerve coming here with this. Absolutely not. He racked up that debt through being foolish and immature.
Please, Sybil, if you don't help, they'll come after him. You don't want that on your conscience, do you? And if you don't want to help Travis, we will sue you in court and fight till the end, so better cooperate.
Their audacity was infuriating. But I knew they wouldn't let it go, so I played along. After all, they weren't going to take no for an answer, and I was not in the right headspace to put up with their crap. Fine. I'll talk to my lawyer and work out the paperwork. But it'll take time. I really don't think it is fair of you to ask. But because we are technically family, I will help.
Thank you, Sybil. We knew that you would see reason.
They left, convinced they'd won. But I had no intention of giving them anything. Over the following weeks and then months, they would call me and ask if my lawyer had written up the paperwork needed to give ownership of one of my restaurants to Kyle, or at the very least, if I could give him enough money to keep the loan sharks at bay. I kept telling them that my lawyer was working on it and that they just needed to be patient. However, it got to a point where I could no longer keep the ruse going, and so instead of continuing to string them along, I reached out to some contacts and tracked down the loan sharks Kyle owed money to. I told them Kyle was planning to skip town, leaving them empty-handed. I figured that maybe that doing so would get Kyle off my case. A few days later, I received a call from Travis's parents informing me that Kyle had been kidnapped by loan sharks. They had to sell their house to pay the ransom, but even after they paid, he was still killed.
How could you? The loan sharks found Kyle. They killed him. This is your fault.
My fault? You've got to be kidding me. Kyle's dead because of his own choices. Maybe if you hadn't coddled him his whole life, he wouldn't have ended up like this. And let me be clear, I never planned to give him or you anything. Ever.
But you told us that you would give him a restaurant and money?
Of course I did. You idiots wouldn't take no for an answer, but let me be crystal clear. Neither you nor Kyle deserved or were owed my help. You three made Travis's life a living hell growing up. As far as I'm concerned, Kyle got what he deserved. That was the last time I spoke to them. Over the years, I heard my husband's ghost haunted them, causing restless nights. Sometimes people would call me, saying my in-laws were acting insane, but I didn't care. Their lives became a nightmare, one they had created for themselves. Even so, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. Losing Travis had been the hardest thing I'd ever endured. He had been my anchor, my partner, and my greatest cheerleader. Without him, there were days when the weight of the world felt unbearable. But in those moments, I found strength in the life we'd built together. Our restaurants continued to thrive, a testament to the love and dedication we'd poured into them. Customers would often share stories about how much they loved the food, or how our place had become a special part of their lives. It reminded me that even though Travis was gone, his legacy lived on. One evening, as I was closing up the restaurant, I found myself looking at a picture of Travis and me on our opening day. His smile was radiant, full of hope and excitement. I could almost hear his voice, telling me to keep going, to live the life we'd dreamed of. Months later, I decided to expand again, opening a fourth location in a nearby city. It was a challenge, but it gave me purpose. Every new milestone felt like a tribute to Travis, a way to honor the man who had believed in me when I doubted myself. One day, while going through Travis's things, I found a book titled To My Lovely Wife. Inside it, I discovered a flash drive. When I connected it to my computer, I found a video Travis had recorded. He started by saying, "If you're watching this, then I'm dead." In the video, he expressed his love for me and warned me not to help anyone in his family in any way. I anonymously posted part of the video, and as a result, everyone turned against Travis's parents, forcing them to skip town. As for Kyle's parents, I heard less and less about them over the years. Occasionally, someone would mention seeing them, looking haggard and worn. The loan sharks had taken everything from them, just as they had tried to take everything from me. In the next town, I heard Kyle's parents had started working for a construction company and were living in a cramped one-bedroom house with a terrible neighbor who played loud music and had dogs that barked at all hours of the day. It was poetic justice, though I took no joy in their suffering. Instead, I focused on the life Travis and I had created. I found solace in the memories of our time together, in the laughter we'd shared, and in the dreams we'd pursued. And as the years went on, I realized that while grief had shaped me, it hadn't broken me. Thanks for watching.
And the next day, all of my belongings were scattered on the front lawn, and I was told that I had 10 minutes to gather up as much as I could before my father would run outside with a baseball bat, and if I was still there. He promised that he would break every bone in my body. I ran around feverishly and gathered up what I could, and then ran away. Hello there, my name is Michael, and my family is absolutely terrible. I know lots of people say that, but mine truly is. Here, let me explain. For starters, I have an older brother named Phil, and in my family, Phil is the golden child. In my parents' eyes, he can do no wrong. Even when he actually did misbehave, they would just ignore what he did, or make excuses for it. The first time that it happened that I can remember. My brother and I were playing outside during the summer, and were playing with our water guns, and at one point I couldn't find Phil. But then, I went to see where he was. I noticed that he was inside in his room, and he had changed. Suddenly, our father came roaring into Phil's bedroom, and he looked furious. "Michael, you have some explaining to do." My father grabbed me by my shirt and dragged me through the house and out to the garage. Once outside, I could see what had made him so angry. Every square inch of the garage was soaking wet. It was clear to me that Phil had turned the hose on in the garage and had used it to spray down every square inch and had even flooded it with a few inches of water too. "What on earth possessed you to do this? Do you have any idea how much damage you caused?" But it wasn't me. I didn't do anything. It must have been Phil. "Don't lie to me on top of everything. Why would Phil do this? He's a good boy and not an idiot like you. Plus, you are soaking wet and he is dry and in clean clothes." "I swear I didn't do it. He must have done it and then changed." "Enough with your lies. You're grounded for the next 3 months. My father then slapped me so hard that he split my lip open and caused it to bleed. After he did, I ran from the room and hid in my closet. As I ran away, though, I saw Phil smiling, clearly pleased at the chaos that he had created. For years, it was one thing after another. Even when it was obvious that Phil had been behind something, our parents always found a reason to blame me. It was just so infuriating. The final straw, though, came when I was 17 and Phil was 19. Our grandfather had recently passed away, and he had left our parents a large amount of cash. The problem was that our grandfather had despised banks and had always kept all his money at home. So when our parents had inherited it, they were given a duffel bag filled with money. They were planning to deposit it into the bank, but they were so busy making funeral arrangements that they temporarily put the money in our father's safe. He had one in his home office, and while they were out planning the funeral, Phil snuck in and somehow managed to get the safe open, and he stole the money. He was, of course, smart enough not to spend it right away, and even took a few $100 bills and planted them in the top drawer of my dresser. When our parents came home that night, our father went to his safe to grab some money as they would need to pay the vendors that they had hired for the funeral service, and when he opened the safe, he was mortified to find all the money was gone. Without skipping a beat, our parents stormed to bedroom and instantly assumed that I was the one that stole their money. "Okay, where is it?" "Where is what?"
Don't play stupid with us, you disgusting thief. We know that you were the one to steal the money. This is a new low, even for you.
"I seriously have no idea what you are talking about." "So you weren't the one to steal our inheritance from the safe? Do you honestly expect me to believe you?" While my father glared at me, my mother began searching through my belongings and found the money that Phil had hidden in my dresser and presented it as proof that I was guilty.
Look what I found.
"Where did that come from?" "I swear I have no idea why that money was in there." "Just stop. This proves that you stole from us. Now, if you don't give the money back this very instant, we will have no choice but to kick you out and quite possibly press charges against you for this." "Then call the police, because I didn't take anything." "If that's what you want, then I sure will." I glared right back at them and just waited. When the police arrived, our parents told them what they suspected to have happened, but after the police had thoroughly searched my room, they had not found any additional money. They told our parents that with the small amount of money that they found, the most that they could do was hold me in jail for a week, while a judge decided how much community service I would be sentenced to. My parents wanted me to go to prison or juvenile hall at the very least, but there just wasn't enough evidence to support the idea that I had committed the crime. They were hopping mad, and the next day, all of my belongings were scattered on the front lawn, and I was told that I had 10 minutes to gather up as much as I could before my father would run outside with a baseball bat, and if I was still there, he promised that he would break every bone in my body. I ran around feverishly and gathered up what I could, and then ran away. I was so young that I really didn't know what to do with myself. With what little money I had in my savings account, I rented a room in a very sleazy motel and got myself a job at a grocery store stocking shelves. It was incredibly scary living on my own at the age of 17, but I managed to make things work. I did live in that motel for over a year, though. It was all I could afford with the little money I was making, and it allowed me to keep going to school. The owner of the motel took pity on me and gave me food every now and then as well. Honestly, it wasn't too bad, aside from the loneliness around the holidays. Those were hard, but eventually I graduated high school, and I was then left with deciding what I wanted to do next. Part of me was really curious about what I would be good at, and then it hit me. I had been wrongly accused of so much in my life already. Maybe I should become a police officer, and eventually a detective. That way I could protect people from being wrongly convicted by catching only true criminals. Without another thought, I applied to the police academy, and after graduating, joined the police. It took a few years, but I eventually did become a detective. It was so fulfilling. I truly felt like I was making a difference in the world, and I had all but forgotten my toxic family when I got a phone call from them. It actually annoyed me more than anything, but I figured that maybe I would hear them out. It was possible that they were calling to reconnect, although my instincts were telling me that if I put too much hope into that idea that I was setting myself up for disappointment. And boy, did I end up being right. Michael, is that you? Yes, Dad. What do you want? Oh, Michael, it's tragic news. Your brother is in serious trouble. Okay. What kind of trouble? He's been wrongfully accused of all kinds of terrible things, like stealing a car and selling drugs. They even accused him of attacking a police officer. And how am I supposed to help him? Well, you're a police officer, right? Couldn't you just make the charges go away? I'm not making any promises, but I'll look into things and get back to you. I knew it. I knew that they would only ever contact me if I could do something for them. At any rate, I did look into what Phil was being accused of. After all, he was indeed wrongfully accused. Then I would help him, but my intuition was telling me otherwise. As I read over the arresting report, I saw that Phil had been tested for drugs and had several illegal substances in his system when he was arrested, and had tens of thousands of dollars worth of drugs in the trunk of his car when he was pulled over. There was even a dash cam in the police car that pulled him over that saw Phil get out of his car and kick and punch the arresting officer once it was clear that he was caught. Everything about what my brother was accused of was true. The car he was driving had even been reported as stolen 2 days before his arrest. Once I confirmed this, I called my father up and happily gave him the bad news. I reviewed the evidence, and Phil did it. Oh, so what? Even if he did, your family. Can't you just make this all go away? Even if I could. Why the hell should I? I'm not going to risk my career to help you, and that moron get off breaking the law. It's bad enough that you accused me of stealing money when I was 17 that I didn't, and kicking me out of the house for it. But now you call me up out of the blue to ask me to jeopardize my future to help you? Oh, that's just in the past. We did eventually figure out that it was Phil that stole the money, and we punished him for it. Punished him? How? Well, we grounded him for a few days. I don't see what the problem is. That's in the past. In the past? So not only did you find out that I never stole the money, but you also never tried to find me and contact me to apologize for blaming me for something that I never did. You had the truth, but you still blamed me? Do you not see how evil that is? Hey, we tried, but you were always a handful. Well, I'm glad that we had this conversation, just so you know. Phil was the troublemaker. It was never me. So you basically have only yourself to blame for him turning into a complete piece of crap. Where were you when you realized you had wrongfully kicked me out and forced me to live in a motel for a year? So now, as far as I'm concerned, you and Phil should share a cell together. And with that, I hung up the phone. I knew that I could probably speak to the prosecutor and ask them to go lenient on my brother, but I did the exact opposite. I called them up and asked them to make sure that he got the fullest punishment possible. As a result, the attorney agreed and demanded that my brother be held as an example of what not to do. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Chances are that if I hadn't intervened that he would have only gotten a year or two at most with a lot of community service, but after what he and my parents had put me through, I wasn't going to let the chance to get revenge on him slip away unnoticed. My parents called me every day right up until Phil's trial and demanded to speak with me, but I just let their calls go to voicemail. I knew that I could just as easily tell them that Phil was screwed, but I wanted to see their reactions when the judge handed their golden child such a heavy sentence, and honestly, it didn't make up for all the pain that they caused me. but it did feel like I got a small measure of justice. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
He made my life a living hell. One time I was 1 minute late to work, just 1 minute, and it wasn't my fault. I had to represent him at a meeting with some investors. They delayed the meeting, making me arrive to work later than expected. He deducted an entire week's salary. Another time I handed him a document that wasn't stapled perfectly. He threw the papers in my face.
Redo it. And if I see a single wrinkle, you're staying overnight to staple every single document that needs to be stapled.
Then there was the coffee incident. I had been working for 18 hours straight. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even sat down. And yet, Damien wanted his coffee. So I made it. Just like always. But I stirred it clockwise instead of counterclockwise, a mistake I didn't even realize I had made. Damien took one sip, then threw the cup across the room. Coffee splattered everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, and on me. The hot liquid burned my skin, but I couldn't even flinch. I had learned not to react.
Do you even have a brain, assistant? You can't even make coffee well? What? Do you want to be fired so quickly? Because I will fire you if you ask for it.
He made me clean up the mess on my knees, in front of the entire office. He'd called everyone to watch me clean up my mess as punishment. They say karma comes for everyone. But with Damien Blackwood, I wasn't sure it ever would. For years, he ruled over Blackwood Enterprises like a tyrant, treating his employees like insignificant insects under his boot. People whispered behind his back, calling him a monster, a devil in a suit. But no one dared to stand up to him. He was untouchable, or so he thought. I didn't know when or how it would happen, but I always believed, hoped, that one day he would pay for everything. And when it finally did, it was glorious. But before I tell you about his downfall, let me remind you exactly what kind of heartless bastard Damien Blackwood was, so you understand why he deserved every bit of it. It would first start from the moment you step into Blackwood Enterprises. The air was always thick with fear. People walked with their heads down, careful not to draw attention. Because if you did, if Damien Blackwood so much as noticed you, your days were numbered. One of his victims was Elena. She was young, ambitious, and eager to prove herself. She got the job straight out of college, ready to make a name for herself. But on her third day, she made the mistake of sneezing during a meeting. A simple, harmless sneeze.
Do you think this is a damn playground, Elena? Or do you think I run a medical center?
I'm so sorry, sir. It was just a sneeze. I didn't mean to sneeze.
You should have held it in. It's just a sneeze, and it shouldn't happen in such professional setting. Take your germs and your pathetic excuses somewhere else. You're fired.
Just like that. No warning, no second chances. She had moved across the country for this job, left behind everything she knew. And in less than a week, Damien Blackwood destroyed her career. One time, an intern named Anita was forced to work for several hours without a break because she arrived 3 minutes late. She was on her period and later became stained because she couldn't leave to change. When she finally stood up after Damien was done with her for the day, he mocked her.
You're an embarrassment to women. You stained that seat. It stinks.
Anita, humiliated, ran off to the bathroom. Then there was Mark, the IT guy. He had worked there for 6 years, knew every system inside out. But one day, Damien's laptop battery died during a meeting.
You had one job, Mark. One. I can plug it in right now, sir. I'm so sorry. The laptop hasn't been working properly recently, and I've made complaints to the HR, but nothing has been done. And you couldn't continue until something was done about it? No, sir. I remind them daily, but they've been awaiting your approval. That's a very lame excuse. You know what? Save your breath. You're fired.
Mark had a wife and 2 kids to support. That didn't matter to Damien. Nothing ever did. Then there was Lisa, the receptionist. Her mistake? Calling Damien's office phone twice in a row.
Are you mentally slow, Lisa?
No, sir. But you requested that I call more than twice if it's something important. It's important, sir.
You're a liar. I never said that. If I don't answer the first time, it means I don't want to be disturbed. Use your damn brain.
He didn't fire her. Oh no, Damien loved to drag out people's misery. Instead, he made her stand at the front desk for 10 hours straight. not allowing her to sit down even once. Her legs were swollen by the end of the day. But do you know who had it the worst? Me, I was Damian Blackwood's personal assistant, or as he liked to call me, assistant. He never used my actual name. To him, I was just another office tool, as replaceable as a stapler. He made my life a living hell. One time, I was 1 minute late to work, just 1 minute, and it wasn't my fault. I had to represent him at a meeting with some investors. They delayed the meeting, making me arrive to work later than expected. He deducted an entire week's salary. Another time, I handed him a document that wasn't stapled perfectly. He threw the papers in my face.
Redo it. And if I see a single wrinkle, you're staying overnight to staple every single document that needs to be stapled.
Then there was the coffee incident. I had been working for 18 hours straight. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even sat down. And yet, Damian wanted his coffee. So I made it. Just like always. But I stirred it clockwise instead of counterclockwise, a mistake I didn't even realize I had made. Damian took one sip, then threw the cup across the room. Coffee splattered everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, and on me. The hot liquid burned my skin, but I couldn't even flinch. I had learned not to react.
Do you even have a brain, assistant? You can't even make coffee well? What? Do you want to be fired so quickly? Because I will fire you if you ask for it.
He made me clean up the mess on my knees, in front of the entire office. He'd called everyone to watch me clean up my mess as punishment. That was the day I realized something. Damian Blackwood had no soul. Even worse, he didn't just mistreat his employees. He forced us to become like him. And if we refused, we couldn't even dare. If we dared to refuse, he would fire that individual and make sure they don't get a job at any big place. He would make their life miserable. He was that bad. One of his golden rules was that every deal had to favor him. It didn't matter if it was unfair. It didn't matter if it ruined someone else's business. All that mattered was that Blackwood Enterprises always came out on top. We were ordered to cheat wholesalers who trusted us. If we could get away with overcharging them, we did it. If we could cut corners on promised services, we did it. And if any of us hesitated, Damian made it very clear what would happen.
You think you have morals, assistant? You think you're morally better than me? Answer me. Tell me you're wiser and better than me. Tell me I'm the bad man.
I didn't answer. I knew better. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that always sent chills down my spine.
Let me remind you of something. I own you. I own your paycheck, your apartment, your ability to survive in this city. If I decide you're useless to me, I'll make sure no one else ever hires you again. Understood?
I had no choice. None of us did. One time, we tricked a small textile supplier into signing a contract that locked them into 5 years of providing materials at a price that barely covered their costs. The owner, Mr. Lin, came to our office begging for mercy.
Please, Mr. Blackwood, if we continue like this, I'll lose my factory. My workers will lose their jobs. And what does that have to do with me? I'll give you a discount on future shipments. I'll work something out. Just please, let me renegotiate. Did you read the contract before you signed it? Yes, but then this conversation is over. Get out of my company.
Mr. Lin's factory shut down 6 months later. His workers, fathers, mothers, people who depended on their wages, were left with nothing. Damian didn't care. Then there was the time we were forced to lie to a wholesaler about the quality of our materials. We told them it was top grade. It wasn't. We knew it wasn't. But if we told the truth, Damian would fire us, blacklist us, destroy our lives. So we lied. And when the wholesaler discovered the truth, they sued. Did Damian panic? No. He bribed the judge and walked away without a scratch. He thought he could get away with everything. He thought no one could touch him. But karma was coming. And when it arrived, it hit him harder than he ever expected. We started our revenge. My colleagues were tired of being mistreated, so we all made a plan. And to achieve our goal, we started by documenting everything. Every single crime, every unethical order, every time he forced us to cheat a client or supplier, we recorded it all. Whenever he yelled, humiliated, or harassed someone else was watching, secretly capturing the moment on video or audio. We had files, proof, evidence of the tyrant that was Damian Blackwood. And when we had enough, we waited for the perfect moment to strike to use them against him. And oh sweet Lord, It came sooner than expected. It happened on a Monday. I had been working for 11 hours straight, surviving on nothing but coffee and adrenaline. My eyes were burning, my hands were shaking, but Damien didn't care. Not like he ever did. That day, the only break he granted me was toilet break. Then, I made a mistake. A small one. I printed the wrong financial report. It would have taken less than 5 minutes to fix. But Damien didn't believe in fixing mistakes. He believed in punishment. To him, anyone who made mistakes deserved the most cruel punishment known to man. He stormed toward me, his face showing pure rage. I was so scared. I wanted to beg. But before I could even utter a word, a harsh slap was delivered to my cheek. The impact made my vision blur. The entire office went silent. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, my cheek burning. Then something inside me snapped. Before I even thought about it, before I could even stop myself, I slapped him back. Very hard. It was so hard that I could see my handprint forming on his skin. The sound echoed through the office. I saw Damien's eyes widen in pure shock. No one had ever dared to touch him. He lunged at me, fury contorting his face. But this time, he wasn't the one with power. Someone immediately stepped forward and grabbed him. Then another, and then they began beating him. At first, it was just about 6 workers, but more joined. The men he had tormented, the women he had humiliated, the ones he had screamed at, threatened, abused. They held him down and made him feel what it was like to be powerless. He tried to fight. He tried to run. But he had nowhere to go. He couldn't escape our grip, the hole we'd kept him in. After torturing him to our satisfaction, we held him down and called the police. By the time the cops arrived, Damien was a bruised, bloody mess. We told them he slapped and beat me up for sneezing. That was a lie, of course, but he couldn't defend himself. Not with the mark on my face, not with the fake bruises we'd quickly created on my skin. The cops dragged him up, cuffed his hands, and took him away. And then, we released everything. The videos, the recordings, the proof. The internet exploded. His name was everywhere. His crimes were exposed for the world to see. Headlines tore him apart, some over-exaggerating things for views. But that worked in our favor, so we didn't mind. His empire collapsed overnight. His investors pulled out. His business partners abandoned him. His reputation was shattered. Then came the court trial. With all the evidence we had, the case against him was ironclad. The charges were laid out: fraud, embezzlement, workplace harassment, and abuse, unlawful termination of employees, bribery, assault. Damien was found guilty on all counts. His company was shut down. All his savings, his properties, his hidden assets, seized and distributed among his victims as compensation. Everything he had built through cruelty and greed was taken from him. And then, on the day of his sentencing, came the final blow. As he was led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, the crowd was waiting. People had gathered, we the employees, former clients, strangers who had seen the videos. We threw eggs, dirt, trash. We jeered at him. We even celebrated his downfall by throwing wine bottles at him. He got a few cuts from the shattered glasses before the authorities controlled the situation. Damien Blackwood, the man who once ruled over us like a king, was reduced to nothing but a disgraced criminal. A nobody. And as he was shoved into the police van, his expensive suit covered in filth, his face burning with shame, I smiled. We later heard that after Damien's family found out how he treated his employees, they cut him off and never visited him in jail. We also learned that he had a toddler and was extremely abusive to his wife. She used his imprisonment as an opportunity to file for divorce and gain full custody of their child. Rumor has it she's now dating someone else and often sends Damien pictures of them together. He becomes furious every time he sees them, knowing another man is raising his child. A friend of mine works as a warden at the jail and ensures that Damien is constantly beaten. He also tells me that Damien has frequent nightmares, claiming devils are after him, which makes him paranoid. Thanks for watching.